very dramatic, the do or die station. So it's to put emphasis on the importance of the pre-anesthesia check for the checkout that you do prior to any case, so your first kind of case of the morning, and then I guess we didn't really go into subsequent cases because you don't have to do everything over again, because a lot of the stuff you're just making sure is in the room and working appropriately and you're not necessarily using it. So, and this is Roger, and he is an expert with the machine. He's been working with it for 25 years and knows all the ins and outs, and I will try to add some clinical kind of basis to what he has to say because I don't have the same knowledge he does. So that's really it.
So, well, what this poster over here, and we'll just start with that to kind of give you a flavor of how we're doing this whole thing. There was a study done at ASA 8 abstract by Sam Lampoutain, who's in one of the programs over here. And he just showed about what people were saying with anesthesia machine checks. And you can just see who the study included, you know, the performance of it, you know, how they even performed the check. You know, 71% said they did it poorly. So it was kind of interesting, the results they had. Well, from that, in 2008, they designed a set of guidelines that you want to check on your machine. So a large panel sat down and said, what should we really check in our machine? What should we throw out? What should we keep? And they developed this list of things. And you can actually see on the side here, they got provider and tech. So if you have an anesthesia tech, these are steps they can do. Some will actually say provider or tech. So you can designate some steps to an anesthesia tech if you want to, but there's steps that you should be doing. And then what we were talking about, like an in-between machine check, that's what this is over here. So if you're doing in-between check, you don't have to do all these steps. You can just sub-step from that. And so from these set of guidelines, we want you to look at the machine that's in your facility and then develop your own anesthesia machine check. In other words, if you're checking the scavenging system, which will be one of your stations that you're around here, it'll tell you check your scavenging system, but you'll have to know how to check that specific scavenging system based on the type you have in your facility. So what I've done is I've created an anesthesia machine pre-checkout procedure based on these guidelines for one of the more common machines in the Draeger line, the Fabius family of machines. And the Fabius Tiro is more their traveling machine. They also have the Fabius GS and the Fabius Premium. And there's a lot of these machines on the market. So this right here would be a checkup procedure that you could do a daily machine check on your machine in the morning. And we'll start to just walk right into that machine check now. Ready?
Yeah.
Ready. So what we start with is, the first thing we want you to make sure is that you got AC powers available.
If you don't get to that,
yeah, and
you're really not going to impress it.
So you want to check to see if you have the power light on your machine, and at different places there's that. And you know, in the facilities I'm at, there's operators tend to ask me, they go, what is the battery life on my anesthesia machine? For some reason, that's a real topic that everybody wants to know, how long the batteries last. And I can tell you that that really doesn't matter that much in real life. Because how many times do you lose power to your hospital? It doesn't happen that often, although it does, and especially if you go on mission trips, it does. But what happens more than losing power to your facility is losing power to your machine. Now, I've had several machines. In fact, the Apollo machine, it's a brand new machine. I've already replaced 4 power supplies on those. So all of a sudden you can lose all the power of your machine. It isn't that now you're on battery backup and you've got a half an hour to think about what you're going to do. Your machine just kips out of it. All right? So make sure you have power. The next thing we want you to do is we want you to check your oxygen cylinder and check your pipeline supply. And we talked about this in great detail.
So do you guys check your oxygen every morning? I feel like, you know, the habit is it's really, really good at it as a CA1, and then you're all right at it as a CA2, and then by the time you're CA3, you're like, for the love of God, let me just do the check that gets me by.
And certainly as 7, 8 years old in the process, now that nobody looks at their tanks anymore, right?
Yeah. What are you looking for when you check your tank? When you're checking the tank in the back? Why are you doing that?
You want to see that it's at least 1,000 CSI.
And what does that tell you? Why do you want it to be 1,000? What's that magic number?
The magic number tells you the amount of time you have left before your oxygen supply runs out.
Does it tell you the amount of time or the amount of oxygen you have?
The amount of oxygen you have, like 330 liters.
Exactly. So
right.
to have, it's, you know, 1,000 I think is just a magic number we came up with because 330, or we can round it to 300 liters, will get you, a good amount of time.
Well,
an
if you're
hour,
running 5
30.
liters of flow, it gets you an hour.
Yeah.
I think that's a common knowledge that you could kind of use. So
Yeah.
1,000 psi to a lot of people, they just know that number, but it really doesn't practicality apply to them. You need to know that you have an hour at 5 liters. That's really what you're looking for on your machine. But
for your boards,
yeah,
you need to know
or for your boards.
that a full tank is whatever 19 to 2,200. You can just remember 2,000 and 660 or 600, something around there. So
Right.
then you can do whatever calculation that they give to you. But
And make sure that you have wall pressure too, looking at your tank pressures. And almost all machines, although there are some exceptions out there, preferentially draw their gas from the pipeline supply, not the cylinders. So if you turn your cylinders on and you have your pipelines plugged in, it'll preferentially draw from the pipeline supply in almost all cases. Now, two, when people check their tank and all of a sudden they pressurize it, if I close it and they look in the front and they see that it's on, it looks like your tank is on, but actually your tank could be off. My suggestion to you would be to always keep your tank off while you're using your machine. Because if you were for some reason to lose your pipeline supply, there would be no alarms to the equipment whatsoever. It would just start sucking out of the tank. And as it sucked out of the tank, as soon as the tank went empty, then you would have an alarm, but by then you wouldn't have any backup. Okay, so it's better to know, oh, my system went out, walk around the back, open my tank, have a half an hour and start screaming for more tanks, and then do it. Okay? Next setup is to check your vaporizers. What you're looking for is that they're just tight on the machine, that they're filled to their proper sight windows, and that the fill ports are just tight. That's just a simple check. The next one is to check your scavenging system. And we do have a booth over there that'll specifically talk about the scavenger, but we wanted to work on all of it. The scavenger, I say, is actually for you, because if your scavenger ain't working, the pollution into the room is something that you're going to be involved in, right? It actually affects you. So check your scavenger for you, check your ambu bag for the patient. Okay, those are the two things. Now, the scavenger, the scavenger also on these draws on almost all the machines that are in here about 25 liters a minute. That's what its suction draws from the system. Now, if you're flowing 10 liters a minute and it's taking out 25, where's the other 15 coming from? It comes from the room. All right? It doesn't draw from the machine, it doesn't draw from the ventilator, it doesn't draw anything. And if I was to shut off your vacuum so that you're putting out 10 and there's 0 sucking out, it goes into the room. All right? That's probably the biggest thing that you should remember is incompetence. So if I shut off your oxygen, or shut off your vacuum, you're going to pollute the room. All right? But at least you don't do a blow up of your patient's lungs.
can you show them exactly how you check the scavenger?
Okay, on
So
this,
you don't
and there will be a
blow up.
station over there, but on this particular one, most of the newer and contemporary machines have a float on the side. They'll have 2 black lines, and you just make sure that your float is in the middle. And you can see that for this machine. So the sequence of pictures I have here for the scavenger to kind of flag you into memory is that here's the whole scavenging system, here's the float between the 2 red lines, here's the black knob that you adjust it with, and once you have it in between these 2 lines, there's a silver disc that you use to tighten it up. So make your own kind of thing if you want. This is something that we can make on a 1-page form with a checkout sheet, and ultimately you want to train your anesthesia tech, if you have them, to do a pre-use check for you. So if you have something like this, you can actually do this on their machine. And now it gives them a guidelines for it to work. The next step is a machine-specific test. In other words, it works specifically on the Fabius. And as you look on this machine, there's a run system test, there's a calibrate flow sensor test, calibrate the O2 sensor, and then your leak and compliance test. You step through these steps, and that's what these steps kind of illustrate, things that you have to set up with the machine to do these tests. And that's machine specific. So in this particular area, we would do something with the other machine. Now the Apollo, when you do that one, you basically set it up for any of you who know the Apollo, and you hit the go button, and boom, it starts doing its test, and it takes around 3 minutes from beginning to end, unless there's a problem. Then it just shuts itself off and says stop. You haven't done this, you haven't plugged this, you didn't turn this on or whatever. Well, the problem is with most operators, as soon as they hit the go button, they go, and they run out of the room. Then they come back, and they think the machine's done, and all of a sudden they find out it just died in mid-stride. So what I would say, when you're thinking about your anesthesia test, start this up And once that is running, do the other things that you need to do. Check your ambu bag, check your monitors, check this, check that,
Drop
and
your
that
meds.
system would be better. Now we're going to get into the
And we've
ambu
just kind
bag.
of brushed over that because all the machines are different. And so
Right.
some of them have them internal, and then, you know, some you have to pull out the oxygen sensor. And so if there's any questions, you can ask. But we're kind of
Right, so-
freezing a little bit
So
because
yeah,
there's
you go on
everyone
these
has different
guidelines.
machines, so it's sort of difficult. But if anyone has any specific questions, please ask. But sorry, go ahead.
No. So now we're going to go to the ambu bag, and this is, like I said, I think really the most important out of all these tests. This step right here is the one thing that you can't miss, because this is going to save you. In my 25 years, I can say there's been about 6 times when the operators really needed it. I mean, they've needed them at times, but I mean 6 where they really needed it, when they were dashing around, oh my God, what are we going to do? And they finally found that it was just like, oh, thank God, that was just in the nick of time. 6 of them, you know, and one of those to you is just plenty. So what I would say, and all the regulations everywhere around, they tell you that you make sure that your ambu bag is available and functioning. And functioning is the key word for you, because you don't want to be caught saying that you didn't touch it. As soon as you say you touched it, they can't question where you did or what you did. But
So what do you guys do when
touch
you
it.
walk into the
Do you
room?
touch them?
You just see it hanging, right?
You see it hanging.
I know, don't worry.
Not good enough. I mean, that's a common thing.
How do you
Everybody.
make sure it's functioning without using it?
Squeeze it and see if it relates.
So do you think that would so by squeezing it, do you know that when you squeeze it on the patient that you're actually going to be delivering what you need? So you can, so just do what you would do on a machine. Just think about it that way. Plug it off and make sure you have a good seal. So then, because if you're just squeezing it, if you have a leak somewhere else, you can feel it coming out, but you might have stuff coming out somewhere else. And then when you actually try to do your 10-liter high flow, because you need to do high flows to be able to get close to 100% oxygen on these guys, you're going to be bagging and not realizing that you're pushing a lot of your oxygen somewhere else. So you can do it. You don't have to like pull it out, make it a 2-minute thing. When it's hanging in the bag, just go like that.
Right,
And
you
you're all
can do
set.
this in the bag that it's hanging on. And in our facility, we noticed a problem with our ambu bag, and we fanned out through the hospital to check every single ambu bag in the hospital. And we found that we had a 10% failure rate, which was exceptionally high. And what the problem was, is when you squeeze it like this, it worked. But when you put your hand over here and squeeze it, it poured out of this seal in the back where the plastic leaked to the rubber. And remember, when you administer gas, it always goes to the area of least resistance. So depending upon the hole and the toughness of your patient's lungs, you might not be able to ventilate. And I mean, that was a real key point. You're really caught when you really need this. This is like way more important than if you had your oxygen cylinder empty out. So I can't emphasize enough to touch and become one with your ambu bag. Become one with the ambu bag.
It gets tricky though. I mean, we have a lot of things to do, and how many times have you used your ambu bag in an emergent situation? You use them for transporting a patient to the ICU or down, but like how many times have you needed to grab it and use it? And so because of that, you end up skimping on things, but then we really need it.
And it might be sitting in that bag for years.
Yeah.
Think about that. It's just festering in there, it's drying up, and it's not working, and nobody's touching. Nobody wants to touch it, because once they've touched it, now they were the last to touch it. So the only way to combat that is to be touching it every single day. There's no way around it. Availability of monitors. You're going to come to a wide range of monitors, and what you feel your test should be is kind of what you should have in a repertoire of monitoring package. Now, Gita has a great story about this particular monitor because it's caught her a few times.
Well, yeah, I mean, you guys, you know this monitor well, and if you don't remember to turn it on during your pre-checkout, you get in the room and you put the patient on the table, you move the IV bag, you put the EKG, pull, all that stuff on, and then you start pre-oxygenating the patient. Your attending's looking at, and then says, "Oh, we don't have CO2." So then you turn this puppy on, and this thing takes like 4 minutes to warm up. And I don't know if that's happened to any of you guys, but it has happened to me here and in my training
And
institution.
everybody's going like this. Okay, what? How long is
Yeah,
that
and
gonna take?
so you're not going to induce without CO2. But even without this, and say you were on the Apollo where it's all built in and you get those nice yellow waveforms, this is something that I did, and it's certainly not anything that I'm saying that everyone has to do, but I always did because I found that there's a lot of issues just with these little things with kinks or, this being full. Before every case, the institution I trained at, we a lot of times had to set up everything because our techs were far and few between. I'd blow into it and make sure I got a waveform. And then I would know that I'm at least mostly set to start the case, but for the majority of the time you always have issues during the case with this also. But as you can see, it's still calibrating, and this feels like eternity when the nurses, surgeons, resident, everyone's just watching you, and everyone's watching this damn thing waiting for.
Well, and the other thing is
CO2
you
to show
actually, you have this expectation that it's going to work. That's not mine, because when I turn this on until I see that, I actually don't think it could work. I've repaired these things extensively over my career, and I can tell you a lot of times you turn these things on, and you wait for this, and you wait for this, and all of a sudden you realize, oh, wait a minute, 5 minutes has gone by. Oh, wait a minute, 10 minutes has gone by. This thing isn't going to work, and then all of a sudden it goes out of calibration. And then you get that. Now you've been waiting 10 minutes. So now you tell somebody to come and bring you another one of these guys, right? And if it's in an area where it's been cold now, he sits there and he needs another 5 minutes to warm up, and now the whole thing is delayed, all in something that you could have kind of prevented. So be warned of your monitors. Try to turn them on, look at everything, glance the room, and make sure everything's good. Verify patient suction. Just click your regulator on and make sure you have patient suction. That's a key item. CO2 absorbent. There's another station that's going to be developed specifically for that, but we have a couple different types here. This kind right here can actually be taken off the machine, and we do not have a leak in our machine at the point. So you can do this live on a case. Now, saying that, you can do that on the Apollo, and you can do that on this machine, but this machine right here, you cannot. So you need to know that if they usually say if this is half full, replace it. And then if it's a little bit in the purple and you're doing a short case, you can do it, or you can just change it on the fly. If you do take this off, remember yep.
Could you actually show that one? That one's easy. That one's hard.
Oh, sure.
I'd love to see that one.
All right. What you'll do is you take this lever here and you just pop it down, and then this guy comes right out. So this one's easy too.
What kind of alignment do you have to give your T?
Well, therein lies part of the problem. Do you have people like me that do their job, or people like me that don't do their job?
Say you don't do your job.
If I don't do my job, this rubber gasket up here tends to have a memory ring in it, let's just call it, from this going up and down. And if this doesn't hit that exact memory ring, then you're going to have a partial leak. Or if I left the granules up there, or if I take this thing out, which a lot of people do, and they like to do this, and because there's granules in here, I knock it on the edge of the garbage can, which creates cracks on the top and little dings, and now that creates tiny little leaks, and all the leaks meld together. So as soon as you open this up, in many cases, somebody changes the CO2 absorbent, and then they get a leak, and they go, and see this right here? When I click it up, if this just goes click and it just snaps right into place, you know that the compression on here isn't very tight, and you'd have to adjust these screws to make this tighter. But this should be hard to click up, okay? There's your CO2 yellow for today. And this guy screws off. So if he's loose like that, it'll leak. So there's really no guarantees of anything. That's why you're doing these pre-use checks, because all little things could happen over time or during the time that it's actually happening. Okay, so that's our CO2 absorbent. The next one is written directly out of their lines. This wording is word for word, and it's kind of a little vague to me, because it's talking about there should be no leaks between the gas supply lines between the flow meters and the common gas outlet. What does that really mean? And what it means is there is basically your vaporizers are not causing a leak in your machine. Okay? And so on these machines, the Draeger line of machines, you can positive pressure check your vaporizers. Meaning that when you're doing a check in the morning, and this is probably the test that I see almost every operator do by far. You skip some and you skip other ones, but almost everybody puts their thumb over this, pressurizes their machine, and looks at their gauge to see if it's leaking. Okay? What I want you to add to that test is to just open up a vaporizer. What you've done now is you've added the vaporizer in this big loop, and you're seeing if your pressure gauge drops, and you're seeing if your vaporizer leaks. And then at the time that this is open, go to the other vaporizers and see if they open to check out the exclusion system, because they should not open. As soon as you close this guy up, open this one and test the other two that they don't open, and so on and so forth.
Do you guys routinely
Okay?
do that?
You guys do that? Is this something common?
I routinely like open them. I haven't tested to make sure that all of them can't open together.
Okay.
You open them though
I
with
open
the
one,
pressure.
Close it. Yeah. Open it.
Does doing a low P test with your vaporizers on exclude doing positive pressure and turning the vaporizers on for leaks?
Is that
Is that
a good thing to do?
no? I mean, I've never turned on my vaporizers and done a positive pressure test. Does doing a low P test with the vaporizers on exclude a positive pressure test with the vaporizers on? Because that should test for leaks in that
What-
O-ring and
No. What? I guess I'm missing a question.
low P test or
Low-
negative pressure.
Well, they called it a negative pressure
Okay.
test because, and that's why I said this is the Draeger line. If we look at the GE line of machines, one of the problems that they have, or differences I should say that they have, is there's a check valve right at this point right here, where the common gas outlet hose comes out of the machine. So all your gas from this whole machine leaves this black hose, just like it leaves this black hose over here. Okay? This is the output of your machine. When this comes out of here, they put a check valve in so that when you pressurize, it won't go in. The only way to actually, you can't positive pressurize this via this component. So what they did is they brought in this tool, which is a negative check device. Most of you, it seems like you've seen it. You squeeze it and it should maintain a negative pressure. So with this check valve here, you can't push it open, but you can suck it open. And so now what you've done is gained access to this tubing, which gets to the vaporizers. By negative pressurizing the vaporizers, you can check them. But in the Draeger, they don't have this check valve. So it's actually easier, and you don't need this, believe it, $100 and some device here, right? You don't need this device at that time. You can positive check.
Yep.
Spend 20 minutes on a machine like that when they're trying to figure out where to plug that into.
Yeah. Well, and the Omega equipment they have actually an auxiliary common gas outlet that you can plug in. The Steve is probably their most common machine that's out there now. The new machines, the Asus and the Avants, are all pre-checked themselves, so you don't really have to check that, like the Apollo machine. But this is something that has to be done, because if you can't check your vaporizers, and a classic situation is like this Tiro machine, which is mostly designed as a transport machine, you can see there isn't even a vaporizer on this machine now. You know, that's how it was brought to us. And these are the input and output ports right here, these two posts that are sticking up, and there's a little cylinder in the middle that actually compresses down, that lets the vapor out. You also can see these little white rings around the outside. These are O-rings. If these are missing, or if these are compromised, or if these posts are, your vaporizer is going to leak. Okay, there's just no way around that. And I've had an account where I was just in northern Wisconsin where this exact specific vaporizer was notorious in my account that I've just started into. And they all leaked throughout the whole entire hospital that I was in. 7 of them, 7 ORs, 7 massive leaks, where they could not run low flows. They told me there's a problem with the ventilator. We can only run 2 liters of gas, and we got to set this to 12 all the time. I'm like, holy man. They said, because the bellows, it just doesn't rise up unless we give it 2 liters of flow. It doesn't return to the top of the chamber. So I came in and I found these leaks so bad, doing a negative pressure check, that the bulb just went like this. It just constantly opened up. I almost thought my test device was bad. They leak so incredibly. The manufacturer told us that, well, no, you're only supposed to set this to 1 and then test the vaporizer to see if it leaks. Well, you never use it at 1. You're using it, probably your sweet spot's between 8 and 12, somewhere in there. Well, what happens is there's a shaft that goes down through here with a bunch of rubber gaskets, and as you turn this up, it compresses them and they leak like crazy, in fact, proportionally. So this thing had a massive leak in them. Once we corrected them, these machines were now, they could deliver 8. They were running, instead of 2 liters of flow, they were running 20 milliliters of flow, and everything went fine. But now I see we've got our 1 minute cycle where we're going to turn, so we're going to zip along here fast. So that's what checking your vaporizer is. Here we want you to turn on your machine, make sure that your ventilator runs, check your low oxygen alarm. If you check any alarms at all, check that, okay? And then final with your machine, make sure that it's, that your vaporizers are off, that your APL valve is open, that your machine is at 0, and just have a final resting place. And like I said, try to train somebody else to do this for you, because you don't want to come in and find out your oxygen tank is empty, your O2 cell is depleted, your vaporizers aren't filled, there's a leak in your machine. Heck, that's going to add a half an hour to your startup, right? You'd rather have your pit crew in there, do all that for you, find all the mistakes, and then you come in and just verify that this works. That's kind of the goal.